Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. It's Allan Laboucan with the Rocks and Socks News Show. We've got another of our interviews with executives of junior mining companies that have made big news, and Brandon McDonald is on the horn today from Fireweed Metals. They had a couple of big news releases last week that I wanted to talk about. Brandon, thanks a lot for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
Well, I guess we'll get the elephant in the room out of the way. You got a $27 million financing announcement, and then you up that to 35 million, but it's from who it comes from. The Lundin family is kind of the royalty of the mining business. They know what mines look like, and they built them, and they're pumping a bunch of money into you guys.
Yeah, no, the family in total will put about 20 million in addition to the $20 million, in addition to the about 4 million shares they already own, I think, circa that much, right? So be a cornerstone position.
And now the rest comes from close associates, or
it is maybe, I haven't done the exact math, but I think it's maybe about 1.5 million of the 35 is from people who aren't shareholders already.
right?
So key cornerstone shareholders, Larry out of the US and Tech, etc., maintaining interest, and our chairman putting in a couple million bucks and that sort of stuff. So which is the way I wanted to do it. It's of course, when you have a big announcement like that and you get a good pop on it, every boy and their dog emerges out of the woodworks and wants a piece of the financing. And particularly one, like, let's be frank, this is pretty dilutive, right? Like we're adding 42 million shares, right? So it's like a 40% increase in the share count. Like, it's a big, right? So if you're doing
didn't
that,
want to put it in warrant clipper flipper hands.
yeah, no, exactly. And you want it with people who have demonstrated their loyalty, and that means in turn that you pay the loyalty back, right? That you make sure they get an allotment. All right. So that's the way I've operated, and that's the way we hopefully can operate my entire career, right? That people put faith in me, and I return the favor.
Well, that reminds me of something Andre Gumon said to me one day. He said, if you treat your shareholders good, they'll treat you good.
Yeah.
And, you're doing it the right way, Brandon, and good on you guys.
Yeah, well, I think we were talking about just before you hit recording. At the end of the day, the rocks need to deliver. You do your best to do right by your shareholders, apply good science, hire good people, treat your people well, yada yada yada. But if the rocks aren't there, they're not there. We are fortunate that the rocks are there in spades, right? So it's made it, I wouldn't say easy to deliver, but it's made it possible to deliver, which is the important bit.
Well, they're an endorsement from the Lundin family speaks volumes to me, because they know what mines look like, and they built them. So, that's a pretty good sign that they like what they see. Speaking of liking what they see, you guys had news out just before that of assay results from your boundary zone that was really the reason that I wanted to get you on the horn today, Brandon, because I saw some stuff in there, not just the grade, but why don't you highlight the grades again that you announced?
Yeah, it was the key intersection there, a step out at Boundary West was 124 meters of 12.3% zinc, and then just over percent lead and an ounce and a half ish silver. The key intersection of 60 meters of 18 to 19% zinc, and also lead and silver, and true thickness not far off that, sort of probably 70% of that, maybe 80% of that, right? So pretty, this wasn't like drilling down something, right? Like it was pretty close to across it. So pretty impressive hole for sure, right? And the most amazing bit is that the first drill hole in this project was 70 years ago, and there's been how many hundreds of drill holes since, 100,000 plus meters of drilling, and we're still delivering the best ever holes, right? So
Wow.
that's but that's a classic district, right? Like, and you look at, the zones that we've I wouldn't say delineated, because there's still, I would encourage people not to sleep on Tom and Jason. There's lots of potential left there, but they've had quite a bit of drilling. Those, as credible as they are, they outcrop or subcrop, right? So the discovery, again, I won't use the word easy, because nothing in this industry tends to be easy, but it was simpler, right? Like when you have, mineralization and outcrop or subcrop, your geophysics, your geochem, much easier to vector. Basic prospecting can vector in on it, right? So eventually, in a district like this, you're going to have to start looking for the stuff that's buried. And what are the odds in a district that there's almost certainly buried deposits, as Boundary West is now? Boundary, main kind of subcrops, but what are the odds that the stuff that outcrops is the best, right? It's like slim, right? So
Well,
it's no
you're at the
surprise.
top of a mineralizing system.
Yeah, so it's no surprise we just keep finding better stuff, particularly as our understanding of the genesis of these deposits and just how much is perspective in this district. As that understanding grows, it's the tip of the proverbial iceberg for sure.
Well, and we touched on that last year when we had an interview. What I had noticed as I was watching this project evolve is that you had these sort of layers of a cake, horizons, and you were hitting lots of high grade in those horizons. But my initial question last year was, well, where does it all come from? And we had that conversation not long after you hit some massive sulfides with some excellent grades in them. And I asked you, well, do you think that this could be a VMS system pumping all that mineralization into the layers of the cake? And you had mentioned, well, what if that vent is very small? It could be difficult to find. And but my counter to that was, well, if you've got such high grade mineralization spread out over a long way into the layers of the cake, it stands to reason that maybe the source of that is something big. And
Yeah,
now it looks like you have tapped into a big VMS system that maybe pumped that mineralization. Do I have it fairly correct?
yeah. Well, I wouldn't call it a VMS, although like it's important to have the context that VMS. I mean, we used to call it SEDEX. Now we call it shale hosted base metal systems and Mississippi Valley types and stuff like that are on a multi-dimensional continuum, right?
See,
Like no project is exactly one, and there's aspects of this that are volcanic, our project that are volcanic hosted, although definitely leads more towards the shale hosted end of the spectrum, occurring at these growth faults. But what's critical is you have to have something that's producing these metal rich fluids, some heat source, some
right?
source of metals, something driving fluid flow, and then something focusing fluid flow, right?
Got
So
it.
for us, the fluid flow seems to be focused at, you've got one major district bounding fault, which you'll see on all our maps. We call it the fertile corridor, right? So this is a major crustal scale fault, like all the way through the crust, right? So
So for the non-geologists out there, these are the cracks in the rock that allow the fluids to have a
yeah.
path of least resistance to make their way towards the surface.
Yeah, and sometimes these faults are syn sedimentary, so same time as sedimentation. So they're not like so much as a crack, so much it's it's movement as the sedimentation is forming. So it's kind of a soft sediment thing. But then we also see where there's that major fault, you've got second order faults kind of almost perpendicular to it. And so every 5 kilometers or so ish, like it's not like a it's no formula for being exactly 5 kilometers or whatever, but around that there seems to be these second order faults, and it seems to be at the intersection of that major fault and those second order faults that seems to be the easiest for the fluids to come through. And then so now you've got these metal rich fluids, and there needs to be something to drive the formation of these deposits, right? So in this case, you might have barite, which will chemically react with the fluid, and this metal rich fluid, the zinc and lead and silver rich fluid will will scavenge sulfur from the barite, which is barium sulfate, and produce, these zinc and lead sulfides, the galena and sphalerite. So, or else, volcanics can be a bit of a chemical trap. Sometimes it just shatters the rock and produces these veins. Other times it seems to be replacing microfossils. So we see so many ways in which the mineralization is formed in this district. And it's so much in contrast to when we originally bought the project. There was a well understood idea of how these deposits were formed. And they didn't get it entirely wrong, except that they just, I think, and even we did when we first bought it, kind of lacked the imagination to think, okay, well, where else could it be, right? And then you start seeing it elsewhere, and which triggers like, okay, well, if I'm seeing it here, where could it be? And now we understand, like when we bought it, it was like Tom and Jason, same horizon, 5 kilometers apart, like 2 different faults, right? So I don't know if you can see my hands here, right? So
Yeah.
5 kilometers of fault apart, but same part of the stratigraphy. That's the only part of the stratigraphy that mattered. Now we know that Tom and Jason are not the same part of the stratigraphy. The boundary zone, Jason sits below Tom. I mean, not directly, but within the stratigraphy. Boundary zone sits below that. Boundary west sits below that. The like, lower sequence,
Like
which we called
steps
it.
in a ladder, or steps
Yeah.
on the.
But all like at any point, like it's driven questions like, when we're drilling at Tom, you get through the massive sulfides and you hit, typically at Tom, you hit a conglomerate that's unmineralized. And that was kind of what we call the stop rock. Like if you hit that, shut down the hole because you're through the mineralized zone. But now what we know about the district, maybe that shouldn't have been the stop rock. Like maybe the ambition should have been to drill through it, and there might have been yet another mineralized horizon. And, we had looked at like Tom East, for example. Tom West was like this big body like this, and Tom East was a little body sitting up here. And we thought, oh, it's an anticline. They've just been kind of like the top of the anticline's gone, right? But that makes sense because high grade of Tom West is here, and then Tom East is up here, which is high grade. So that kind of makes sense. But thinking about it now, we actually think that Tom East might be stratigraphically below Tom West. So actually, it's not the same horizon. It's not an anticline. It's not that. It's just could be a different horizon because the rocks never quite. Our geologists looking at it, but never quite fit that it was the other side of an antiform. So, it just shows you how exploration success at boundary made us rethink Tom, which is 20 kilometers away, right? So, we definitely don't know everything.
And now as you're getting closer to the feeder, you're probably rethinking things again about how everything.
Well, and what feeder, right? Because each deposit has a feeder, right? So for example, you see some very feeder-like structures at Tom East and West, particularly Tom West, where it starts to get very massive, lots of siderite, brecciated, right? Like very feeder-esque. That you get that at Jason South, very feeder-esque. We get that at bits of boundary zone that looks like this feeder. So it's clear that, we talked about the major fault and the second order faults.
Yeah, is that the
Every
secondary
locus
faulting?
is its own feeder, right? Like,
Right.
so there's not countless, but there's a lot of feeders in this district, right? So, and understanding that every deposit you find or series of related deposits may come from a common feeder, and certainly vectoring towards that tends to increase grade.
And that's what you saw happen as you drilled into this. You're getting closer to the big structure, not the
Yeah.
secondary.
Yeah, and of course, being close to the feeder doesn't always guarantee improved grade. It guarantees a change in the metal mix, but you also have to look at the chemical reactivity, right? If you're right at the feeder, but there's nothing there for the fluids to do but go away, like there's no reactivity, then the fluids go away from the feeder, and there might be some very nice, very discrete mineralization there, but you might get a nice big barite body away that soaks up all the fluid. So actually, the real mineralized body is not at the feeder; it's a little bit away.
But
So
this
there's
time you got the sweet high grade.
yeah, well, and interesting, very low lead to zinc ratio, which if I was at Tom and Jason would tell me I'm not at the feeder, because at Tom and Jason, lead starts to become more important than zinc as you get right at the feeder, which is consistent with what you would expect in these systems. So there's just, is Boundary just a more zinc dominated system? What drives that zinc domination? We don't know. So like what it all means is that every year we understand less, but in a good
Learn
way,
more.
right? So and we become increasingly moving away from model driven exploration and more towards like understanding, okay, if we know nothing, let's go data driven. Like let's use our geophysics and our geochem and kind of open our minds a little bit.
And your structural geology.
Yes, structural being a huge one, right? And
Yeah.
using those to kind of understand, okay, how do we look for these things? It's exciting, but yeah, like this is the sort of place that
You lose some hair that way, bro.
yeah, well, it's certainly going gray, right? Like it's the Obama effect of doing this, and that's probably the number one benefit of being able to raise such a chunky amount of money, is that we've been kind of underfunded and outmanned and outgunned, I would say, for a while now. And
now you can really go at it.
yeah, and bring on the people we need to put our best foot forward, right? Because it doesn't do us any good to burn people out. That's not how you maximize success. Is like, I love, Elon Musk wants everyone to go hardcore, and it's like, well, that works for a while. Like you can do that in spurts, right? But you can't do a 3-year hardcore sustained push, because you'll lose all your best people. You start making mistakes, and this industry is one where mistakes are extremely expensive and dangerous, right? So this is not one where you can afford to make those sort of mistakes. So I'm glad that finally we're going to have the ability to really staff up and give this project what it deserves.
So Brandon, something else, I was watching some of your interviews after this news went out, and you had mentioned there was a bunch of holes left. You've only, what, 1 or 2 you've announced, and do you have more holes in that area around where you got the big hit?
Well, we did. I had the numbers wrong. I kept quoting people that we did 32 holes and 28 were at Boundary and Boundary West, and 4 were at Tom. Turns out there's more at Tom. I think 8 there. But we've only reported 2 of those 32 holes. So there's quite a bit to come, and there's none super close to that hit that we just had, which is be a bit of a problem as we try to pull that into a resource update, because we might not be able to pull that really great hole into the resource update. It's kind of TBD. But we definitely have a bunch more exciting stuff. And, I understand how people might have wanted us to wait till everything was back to do the financing, but it's like, I already pushed the Lundins a couple months, because I made it pretty clear that I wanted at least some of my drill results out. I wanted my metallurgy from Boundary Zone out, which was great met. And then I was going to be able to do a financing, and credit to them, they didn't, they were 100% respectful of my desire to do that, right? And the share price went from 60 to almost 80 by the time we did the financing. And because they're not looking for 20%, right?
They're
Like,
not looking for a 20-cent move in a stock.
no. So although like they basically got it since we did our financing, right? So
yeah. Brandon, you could never do anything that pleases everybody. You just have to do what's best and how you feel it's the best. And watching as an outsider looking in, you guys have done a great job. This is exploration. It ain't easy. And, you're always trying to be a bit of a juggler. And I think you've juggled this very nicely.
Well, and it's a series of difficult decisions, of which all your paths forward are suboptimal. Like, there's not a perfect one. And whichever one is closest to perfect, you don't get to find out until after the fact, until after you've made that decision. And you don't even know about the other one, because how do you know what the outcome of a decision you didn't make is? Right? Like
Exactly.
there's no truly knowing, right? So this
Proving
is
a negative.
yeah, right. So this is like the job is to take the best information you can and make a tough choice. And when you've got, I mean, this was definitely the right move. Like when you've got that sort of group that's willing to come behind you.
Well, you did the right thing for them and you did the right thing for your shareholders.
Yeah.
You got that result out.
Yeah.
You gave the market a chance to, go to a dollar or two, whatever it wants to do. It went
Yeah.
to 80 cents and you got to get it done.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't
And
say, oh, can you just hold off your check a little while? I might have some more news and I want the stock to move up a little bit more.
well, and the other thing as well is like if you wait till all your results are out to raise the money, everyone knows that, well, Fireweed's going to raise money as soon as the last drill hole's out, and everyone stays out of the market, and you don't get any buying, and you find out you don't move on your drill results at all. Whereas now everyone knows when the drill results come out, there's no financing coming, right? Like they've got one path to ownership, which is the open market, right?
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's
another big point you made in an interview that I heard about
yeah,
you, I think it was on Mining Stock Daily today,
yeah,
was
Trev, yeah.
that you got a bunch of planning to do.
Oh yeah,
And we have an industry now that doesn't have enough drills, doesn't have enough people. And even though it sounds like a long time, you've got like months to get this together and
yeah.
get in there and do a big program.
Well, and we had our biggest ever program this year, and we're going to double that next year. So you can imagine the logistical challenges of doing our biggest ever program this year, and now we've got to do twice as much, right? So it is extraordinarily non-trivial just to make that happen. Like you need the people, you need the time, and this is why like end of last year we did like a flow through financing right at the end of the year, and it was strictly just to make sure my team had the confidence to go get drills, etc., and to make sure the drillers had the confidence that we could execute on the program. Because I can tell you, you go put out an RFP saying, I want 4 drills, and they read your last quarterlies that say you have $2 million in the bank or whatever, and that there hasn't been a financing since then, they're gonna go sign up with someone else. Right. Like, so
That's the nature of the business now that I don't, everybody sort of looks at the stock chart and the stock price and they kind of think that, that's all that matters. They don't understand there's camps to build, there's people to hire, there's rigs to get ready. There's, you got to get in there and now you got to double your camp size.
yeah.
That, they've never been part of what it takes to, do your largest program last year and
Yeah.
now do double next year.
Yeah. And like this year as well, like the first, I mean, they'll be drilling right from the get-go, but we've got to drill there over winter. But we're not going to have the full amount of rigs this coming summer until after we expand the camp, because you need camp space for the people who are expanding the camp, right? So it's like this, it's like it's not just like snap your fingers and a camp shows up, right? And it's ready to go. So there's a lot of work to be done, and we've got the right team to execute it.
Well, and not only that
team,
physical work that needs to be done, but then you have mental work. You got to incorporate all these results. And that's one thing I mentioned last year that I really appreciate about you and your team is that you're always willing to look at it from a different angle and then take the data and go with that.
yeah.
But you got to get all that data, compile it all, put it all together, and start generating information.
Well, and building that there's always tension between the operations people and the geology people, because the operations people say, I need every drill hole sent to me in advance, like 2 months in advance of summer. And the geology team is like, I can't possibly give you every drill hole because I want to change my mind if we hit something particularly interesting. And so it's this battle of like, okay, how many drill holes ahead does the op teams have to be? Because it's not like it's like, I want to move the drill and you just move it. There has to be a pad. You have to make sure you permitted that pad. Is there going to be water there? What are the, like, so which drill is it going to be? Which hole is shutting down the right side? What's the shortest moves? And like, so even within season, we've been able to turn around, I think every year really, a change in plans near the end of the season, which is essential, but it drives your ops people nuts, right? But that's, it's kind of the way it has to be, right? So,
Well, Brandon, I really appreciate that you're giving investors out there, which is what I'm always trying to talk to, some ideas about how these exploration companies really run. You know, they think, well, you put a hole in the ground and you find a mine.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh, it's
it
so
doesn't work like that.
well, and it's got to be, geology is the most blue collar of the sciences. It is not many other scientists understand, how to operate a generator or how to, build all these things or the ins and outs of porta potties versus drop toilets versus septic fields versus, which is our literally, I swear, like our number one operational issue going to next summer is where do people poop, right? Like this is like that's the big permit issue, right? So it's such a different thing than what people think is like you'd be surprised how much bandwidth that Fireweed goes into, like, do we have enough water for it's not beds. Beds is easy, right? Like it is water, food, and toilets. That's basic, and showers, I think, is kind of like our big thing for execution next year, right? And obviously drill programs themselves complex, but that's the early operation stuff.
So
And it
speaking of next year, I know
Yeah.
we're kind of getting tight on time here for you,
Yeah,
Brandon.
sure.
You're a
Yeah.
busy guy these days. Did you get knighted from like, is there a ceremony when you?
No, it was like Dragon's Den. I swear, like, and I was joking to them about that because like uh, about 6 or 7 of the family members were in the room, and there was one on the call, and there was some of their advisors there. So, and me, which is, obviously it's high intensity for me, right? Because there's a lot on the line. But credit to the Lundin family. I've never, like, nobody in the room had needed to demonstrate, had the ego to need to demonstrate how smart they are, which I'm sure you've got. Like, you're talking to all these bankers or analysts or investors who always feel the need to, like, some gotcha, right? Because
Yeah.
they want to demonstrate they're smarter than you. And it was such a collaborative conversation, really
Wow.
kind of like what about this? What about this? Have you thought about this? And just, riffing on ideas and stuff like that. Which is a good indication that there are people you want to take money from.
Because they've done their homework.
Yeah, well, they've done their homework, and they're not going to be this, pain in the ass backseat driver. They're going to be someone, a sounding board, sage advice, someone who can help you with connections, but not someone who's going to be a pain in your ass for the sake of being a pain in your ass, right? Which
Right.
some investors
Well, in
want to
reality, this
do.
business can be full of that, Brandon.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Can you
and
give us a little, I think we got a handle on, your near-term
yep.
news flow, but then what does next year, you're doubling your program? Are you going to go after this area and move towards the structure? Are you going to delineate out Tom and Jason? What's the big strokes of your exploration? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, we'll deliver a resource update for Mac Tongue and I think Mac Pass, first half of next year. Um, economic studies on those due. Both the economic studies, I'm not 100% sure about. Pretty sure, but it has to do whether there's an additional piece of data that maybe makes a big difference, and I don't want to deliver the wrong study early, right? Doesn't make any sense. So we'll see on those, but definitely heading towards those, and already with trade-offs underway. But really, next year's drill program, we haven't finalized the strategy on it yet. So there's a variety of
Well,
paths.
you got a bunch more results to come in before you can.
Yeah. So how do you? And I think there has to be an internal discussion about uh what's the right strategy, as much as we could know. Is it just let's build the biggest inferred resource possible? Um, does delineating tighter on some of the high grade zones add more value? Does some wildcat cat holes on some of the new targets add value, even if it doesn't add resource? Does a discovery on a new target, like an Imperial or a Kobach or something like that, does that, like, kind of get the market excited, and potential partners and acquirers excited? There's a lot of decisions to make, right? So at this point, like, trying to nail down what we're doing this year, I just don't know yet. It's going to be twice as many holes. I think like let's say somewhere between 50 to 80 holes versus the 32 this year. A lot going on. Definitely some broad strokes, baseline work as well. Because even though like it's not clear what mine we'd want to build yet, I think we want to set the stage for that early, right? So, and I think that's makes good sense. And I think juniors that want to be perpetual explorers are dangerous. At some point, particularly we've got mine
Got to
builders
run the
backing us.
economics.
Yeah, we got mine builders backing us. So if nobody wants to buy us, then we'll build a damn mine, right? Like try and stop me, right? Like
Well, if I could throw my hat in the ring, I'd say Swiss cheese that area around that fault and keep going
yeah.
deeper, because I think you might hit a zonation where you got zinc, lead, and silver up top, and maybe some copper and gold below that. But
Well, it happens, like we've used Red Dog as an analog for bits of it. And to be clear, Red Dog is an absolute freak of nature. Nothing we've seen at our project suggests we have the craziness they do. But in terms of like genetic similarity and textural and stuff like that, there's zones there that they sometimes entertain running a copper circuit. They're looking at some stuff they're stockpiling for end of mine life to process for a bulk copper zinc con. They do get some gold. Farrell got some gold as well in bits. We did have that hit last year that was 1.5% copper in a narrow interval, but was like, okay, so there's clearly in places some copper, and we are rerunning. We've never done fire assay for gold. So we are rerunning some old samples on the high grade bit just to see, is there
sniffs
some
of gold.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm don't want to get anyone's hopes up. I'm guessing it's not going to be of huge economic importance, but even if it's minor economic importance, like, you build these mines on, 1% savings in operations iteratively and 1% improvements in revenue iteratively, right? And it grows and grows and grows, right? So when your revenue gets, as that margin gets higher and higher, it gets more and more robust. So got to explore all these angles.
Cool. Well, I'll let you go. Thanks a
Thanks,
lot.
man.
Go plan that big program, and I hope to have you on more regularly, Brandon. I really admire what you guys are doing there. I'm
Thanks,
a
man.
big fan of what you're finding. I like big. I like high grade too, and you seem to have the potential for both. So let's do these more often.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Hopefully it's a killer 2023 for us.
Well, I think 2022 or at the early part of 23, you might have some more good stuff to talk
Yeah.
about.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to close it off, Brandon. If you want, you can hang around and we can have a talk at the other end.
Sounds good, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, there you go, folks. Fireweed Zinc has been a bit of a
Fireweed
market
Metals.
darling. What's that? Fireweed
Fireweed Metals.
Metals. Sorry. Fireweed Metals has been a bit of a market darling of late, and for good reason. They're looking like they've got something very special. I've talked about layers of a cake, and they're getting closer to the cracks where they're getting thicker intersections and higher grades as they go deeper and closer to that fault. And then you got the Lundin family putting a bunch of money in. Things are going in the right direction for the company. And I actually did a show a while ago that things are going in the right direction for the stock as well. Your stock has been both the 200-day and the 50-day are moving upwards in the right direction, and that's usually the sign of a bullish trend. And looks like you guys got a lot of catalysts there to see that trend continue. So there you go, folks. I think if you're interested in zinc and the possibility of maybe some copper and lead and silver and
Tungsten.
And tungsten, yeah, we didn't even talk about the tungsten. And sort of an endorsement from a family that knows what mines look like, and they're putting money in at an early stage here. This is one for you. And as always, you got to speak with your financial advisors and do your homework before making any investment decisions. But in doing that homework, I suggest you go to their website and you look at their news releases, their corporate presentations. They do a heck of a good job of explaining everything they're doing. And I still think they got a very cheap valuation. So do that homework. I think it'll be worth your while. On that note, have a great day, and we will talk to you soon.